So great. So tonight we are going to overall talk about, this is pretty much one of our most favorite things to talk about, soil, water, plants, and climate, and then how we, as human beings, can have such a profound and meaningful impact when we really engage with soil, water, and plants. Altogether.
Yeah.
Right. So, oftentimes it gets divvied out and we talk about soil over here, and then we talk about water over there, and then plants over here. And then climate is even totally separate often, right? So
that's about something else. Yeah.
That's something totally different. So we started realizing, like, not only are we siloing everything out, and the way we're addressing issues with soil, water, and plants and climate are also sort of siloed, and that by doing that, we're not having the impact that we could have and we want to have for the planet, for our communities, and for ourselves.
Yeah, we're overlooking a lot of relationships in the way that we've been managing. The collective
we
management on the.
Yeah. So before we dive in, and there's so much to say, and we will leave room for questions at the end, we just wanted to tell you a little bit about ourselves. Allison did a little bit already. Thank you. So I am Anne Freiwald, and
I'm Lydia Neilsen.
And together we are Vital Cycles.
Vital Cycles, woohoo!
And we do permaculture education, and what makes us a bit unique is we bring in a lot of ideas around human ecology and yes, regenerative design, which is also part of permaculture, but really to bring it out that it's not just regenerative design of a landscape, but regenerative design of our lives, our communities, the way we live, the values that we have. So we really like to weave that together.
Yeah. We really like to bring home the aspect of permaculture that we are nature, and we are nature working, and it's an inside job, and the mindset of separation has not served us or the planet. So here we all are. We're in it together.
Yeah. So, and then we want to give you a taste of what it would be like to be in this the second Benicia Permaculture Design course, which we are incredibly excited about having been invited back to participate with. We love working with everyone at Sustainable Solano and love being in the community of Solano County and Benicia. So we're thrilled, and it's going to be starting up in September. Just to give a little brief teaser about that. It's over 6 months. So September, October, November, December, January, and then February. But February is a presentation day.
It's just one day.
It's just one day, but it's one weekend a month, 2 days, one weekend a month, September through December, and then February is just one day for presentations. And the presentations are exciting because everyone in the course will create a permaculture design. And so there'll be a landscape or a garden or space, or, the first PDC, we had someone do the Vallejo DMV, right? So really all kinds of locations that it can be. And you'll design you'll design something based on the material that we cover in class.
Right.
And so the class itself is going to be 72 hours. It's jam-packed with information that
good stuff.
Really has potential to change everyone's lives. I think our lives change every time we present it. It's just something new and different always comes up. And then there is coursework outside. And so that's part of doing the design project, which is in a group of at least 2 people. So you and at least one other person, preferably at least 2 other people. And it's just really fun.
We really help walk you through the process too. We don't just throw it all at you. We meet with the groups in class and, really help you come through this whole visioning and figuring out your goals and assessing your site and researching the history. And then, like, how do you connect all these elements? How do you create this design and bring all your new creativity into a manifestation? So people really have a great time doing it. We really love to see them. And that's kind of the culmination of the 6-month course.
Yeah. And then, you might, if you're not already interested in it, why might one take a permaculture design certification course? Maybe you've already done all your education, right? But we don't ever stop learning, do we? Right? Like people who tell me, oh, I already did it all. I say, oh, that's not really, I don't think so. I think there's some more. So, it's continued learning. So maybe you're someone who just really wants to just dive deep into the soil, to get your hands in the dirt more often, or you want to plant more, or maybe
grow all your food,
or maybe you're an architect and you want to learn new ways of bringing regenerative design into that work, or you're a teacher and you want to bring this curriculum to your students, or maybe you're already a landscaper, but you're like, well, gosh, what is a swale and a berm anyway? And why do I do that? So there's so many reasons. Or you could just be curious, as we mentioned earlier, about how can I, in this time in the history of our planet, have a beautifully profound impact on my community and the spaces around me. And guaranteed that taking a permaculture design course will change the way that you just look at other people's gardens, look at the way people are designing parks and buildings and all of that.
Cities and systems and all of that. Yeah.
So that's really a good one, because we all need to feel good and we all need to feel purposeful, and we all are and can be. So that's our belief. And so, we invite you to check out the site. And if you have any questions, you can ask Allison. And if you needed to talk to us one-on-one about the program, we'd be happy to arrange that too. So, anything else we want to say about that?
Well, just, the whole thing is about this shifting in our mindsets, this perspective, and seeing ourselves as inside of it. And that perspective needs to be in every profession, in every meeting, everywhere. So whatever you do with your life, this information will give you a new lens and help you bring a more integrated awareness of what we're doing on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the tools that we like to use, that we learned from a teacher and mentor of ours, Dennis Klochak, is we bring in what's sort of in the middle here is this alchemical mandala. And, we don't, for us, it's a real grounding point of earth, water, air, and fire. We're going to be bringing this in. So we bring earth, water, air, fire into every weekend, and then throughout the entire course. We won't go completely into that now, but we're going to bring it in today.
Yeah, because it fits perfectly with our topic for this evening.
Yeah. So you might ask, so what is the alchemical mandala? Real quick, we'll just say it's really a map. It's a map of experience and a map of transformation. So when we're in the earth, it's like, we feel like we're very grounded in our values, in our roots, that we really know where we stand in our beliefs. We're solid, right? Which is a great place to be, but and
could be a little rigid.
It could be boring too, right? You don't want to be there all the time, right? You have to bring in new information and grow. So, then we kind of scoop up here into water and
a little more flowy, kind of some process and some change and a lot more movement.
Yeah, a little bit of loosening, like,
there's a lot more out there for me to
some new sediment just landed. I think I'm going to integrate that. What's that going to be like, right? So then we come up into air.
Ooh, even looser.
And so this is really the paradox. The this is true and this is also true, and wow, that's true also, and
anyway the wind blows.
Anyway the wind blows, and maybe what I thought I knew, I need to take another look at to really understand it new again. So that's air, and then the fire. So fire is, major transformer. During all the fires we've had in the last couple of years, we kind of like to talk about fire in terms of fermentation here.
Gentle wet fire.
It's a gentle transformation with the use of fire. It's effervescent and sparkly, and but still very transformative, and a lot of change happening there.
It's like a threshold. You're never the same.
Yeah. And so how do these tie in then to earth, water, soil, water, plants, and climate? So how lovely. So the earth obviously is the earth, soil. Is the earth. Water is obviously water, and we're talking about all the forms of water, which we love to talk about and get into. We'll do that
and
in a moment.
The water cycles kind of fingers in all of it here.
Exactly. And then the air is the plants.
Yeah.
So air is aligned with the plants, because the plants, they're really facilitating what's happening in the air and bringing that in and putting it into the soil, putting it into themselves. They're the facilitators.
Right. Taking that carbon dioxide in, letting the oxygen out, moving a lot of water vapor. A lot.
Yes. And then the fire is sun and photosynthesis.
And that warmth that fuels everything, all of the processes on the planet.
Right. Like our friend Brock, right? He said one time, I thought that was so amazing. Do you want to say what it was? He said,
sure. Brock Dolman, he said, listen, folks, warmth is the exception. Everywhere out there in the universe, it's really cold in outer space, right? We're so special and so lucky here that we have the warmth of the sun and the atmosphere to hold it in. So,
right. And the plants to gather that energy from the sun and bring it to us. And then climate is the interaction of all of these, right? So the interaction of earth, water, air, and fire, and how we manage sounds too strong, but how we interact and engage with each of those. So we're going to take you on that journey. Again, this evening. We'll go to the next slide. Oops, what's not letting me advance? There we go. Okay, so just to start off and base this all back into permaculture.
Right.
So permaculture, again, this all has to do with the soil, water, plants, and climate, but this is a lens. So we mentioned it many times now. So we really want to see through new eyes, see everything with new eyes. And so these here at the top, earth care, people care, fair share, these are the permaculture ethics. And then, when we want to ask ourselves, well, is this regenerative? Is this permaculture? We're like, okay, so is the earth being cared for? Are people being cared for? And actually not just like all the people, and actually all of the beings as well, right? So we could say being care there. And then fair share. Right? Is there some hoarding going on, or is everybody, and again, let's not look at the whole world. Let's just look at systems or things that we want to design ourselves, right? Is the earth being cared for? Are the people being cared for? And am I having is this my fair share? Is this our fair share? And how can we design with these three principles in mind? And
designing systems where resources don't get throttled up in any one place, but continue to move through. That's our long-term goal.
Right. So these are some of the 26. So there's this, so permaculture was founded, it was created, put together, a while back, David Holmgren
in the 70s,
and Bill Mollison. And they were coming, again, talk about siloing. They were coming from divergent fields. And they thought, how interesting. Why don't we bring these together? And they actually, created permaculture as a system for interpreting, honestly, things that indigenous peoples and have been doing for millennia with the earth care, and synthesized it basically in a way that Western people could sort of grasp it and grapple it. So they didn't create anything new. They put it together in a way that could be measured, so to speak, and implemented in a way that our Western minds at that time could use.
Right. I mean, and it was pretty revolutionary in how it was interdisciplinary and crossed over different departments in the university, and so that was pretty earth-shattering, but it was a really nice comprehensive body of work that Western culture could absorb and adopt.
So what they did then is Bill Mollison put together 26 permaculture principles. And these principles some of them are here. How many are these here that we put?
We have 10 here.
Yeah. So 10, what a great. Okay.
And they act like stories, ways of thinking about the world. It can be one word or phrase that remind us of a whole bunch of other stuff that help us understand what's going on at any given moment in the world.
And they can be taken and applied to any situation, and every single situation, each story, each principle is going to be possibly slightly different, right? Depending on what's happening there. So these ones we chose for this presentation, and so we'll be looping them in throughout, but we'll just speak them real quickly. So observation is pretty much the key permaculture principle. It's that thing where you can't really make a good design that's that involves earth care, people care, fair share without some observation first, really looking and seeing what's already there, who's already here, which way does the wind blow, literally, how does the water flow, where is the sun coming from? So observation.
Then succession of evolution is really the recognition that systems evolve and things change over time. And if we understand what has to happen in what order, we can work with that and encourage it and enhance it in this beautiful way. And it works on the physical planet and outside in the yard, and it works in families, and it works in businesses, and it's just part of how systems evolve.
Right, and least change for greatest effect. I'm going to say it's one of my favorite. The garden that I tend is a wonderful example of least change for greatest effect. And this is just, what is the smallest thing we can do that's going to have the most powerful impact? And that's what we need to be looking for, instead of how can we change everything the most, right, to get this other thing. So so that's one I'm going to do.
Yeah, that links into relinquishing power, really, because so often we feel like we have to control every piece of something and engineer it out. And honestly, you make a little change, the right little change in the right time at the right place, and then you can just let it go. And systems unfold in the most beautiful way without us having to control and have power over.
Right. So yeah. Exactly. So the problem is the solution. This is also one of our favorites. So again, when we're thinking about soil, water, and plants and climate, right, the problem so often can be the solution. And I mean, just going to the one that people always bring up, like we as humans can be seen as a problem on the planet. And we also have the capacity to be the solution with the choices that we make, the values that we have, and how we live them. Other things could be, that's another good one. Well, our like food scraps. Okay. Food scraps is people have too much food. 50% of our landfills in California are filled with food scraps and lawn clippings, right? That's releasing 41% of the methane in the state of California. It's food scraps and lawn clippings, garden clippings. That problem can be turned into soil, right? So taking that out and doing something else with it, which is talk about a least change for greatest effect, right? So let's not fill up our green bins with perfectly good future soil, right? So we'll say that. Of course, if you have some weeds or ivy or something that you're really wanting to get rid of, but there are other ways, and we would cover that in the class. How you can deal with those. But anyway, let's go to diversity.
Okay, diversity of functional relationships. I mean, this is really just about making the most connections you possibly can. And so when you're thinking about your landscape, what plants are going to be connected to how many other beings, how many other plants, how many people, how many pollinators, bees, bugs, birds, all of that good stuff. And as you move through your community, like how many functional relationships can you form with members of your community? How can you all be supporting each other? And how can the members of your community and the landscapes all be supporting each other as well? So this is one of the most fun and juicy, and because it just gets us all connected. It's so good.
Yeah. And as we're going through these now, just be thinking about, okay, so how is that going to have to do with soil? How is it going to have to do with plants, water? And then use on-site and biological resources. We've already addressed really wanting to keep everything on site. So think about that. I'll just, I'll do a little spoiler, with water. We flush water that we pay for down into the sewage system every single day, or we shower, or we do whatever. How can we keep more of that on site to then feed our plants, to feed our soil, instead of having it just wash away?
Tell the story about Dee Dee Purr's house and her friend.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So there's a wonderful book. Which book was that? That was in the Ecology of Care. Ecology of Care.
Yeah. Ecology of Care.
Ecology of Care by Dee Dee Purr's house, who we love. She had this funny story where she was saying, I was talking with a friend of mine, and we were talking about, carbon in the atmosphere. And he was like, wouldn't it be great if someone could invent a machine that could pull the carbon out of the air and put it into the soil? And she said, I got 450 gigatons of that on the planet, right? Of plants. So, we don't need, again, that's least change for greatest effect. We don't need to build necessarily a great, big, brand new machine. We have, if we tend to what we already have and the biological resources that we have right at our fingertips. And how can we become really skilled at noticing what resources we are not using and keeping on site, and what biological resources can we engage with rather than mechanical or other. There's some wonderful mechanical resources, not to just that, but sometimes people turn to them more often than they need to.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they tend to need energy and make pollution and noise and heat and stuff. So let's use them minimally.
There we go. Okay. Next slide. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. And lastly, we just want to paint the soil that so based on the principles, what we're talking about with New Lens is this idea that when soil and water and plants are addressed together, right? This is what we get. We get healthier, deeper topsoil. We get
cleaner, abundant water supplies.
And lush green landscapes and habitat.
Where there's so much diversity, yeah.
Yeah, better air quality, right? We've got more plants that breathing in more fresh air.
Filtering out dust and pollutants too, yeah.
Fewer floods and wildfires.
More moderate climate overall, like microclimates around individual homes and cities, and also more moderate climate and continental-wide and globally.
Yeah, less erosion and silting of dams, right? Because things aren't just falling off the hillside. Things are sticking together more. There's more plants. There's more healthy soil, keeping things together. Also increased biodiversity.
For everything, for plants, for animals, for humans, for types of living.
We're gonna get all into that in just a moment. And then lastly, just less spending on infrastructure, public health, and disaster recovery, right? Like think of all the money we spend on disasters when we could be spending money proactively to prevent them in the first place. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight. And the reason, we looked for a picture here and, we had all of these really beautiful gardens and whatnot. And we saw this one, we're like, yeah, this is amazing because this is Chicago.
No, it wasn't Chicago, but it was in a part of a contest that was
part of a contest about healthy cities.
Yeah.
And the important thing to remember is that a lot of people are wanting to leave cities now to go out into the country to make the world a better place. And really what we need is a lot of people right where they are and becoming people of place and making where they are greener, because our urban areas, they're about 2% of the planet, and they are home to 50% of the people, and they use 75% of our resources, urban areas. So it is so critical for us to all become good stewards and tenders, not just definitely of the places that are still green, but let's not go there and chop down trees and build new. Let's build what we have and make it greener and more lush and more vibrant and more alive and healthier places to live in general.
We can integrate the things we know about how ecosystems work and how the planet keeps herself cool and healthy, and we can integrate those into our urban environments.
And there's so many wonderful success stories, from the international success stories of people really focusing on large urban areas and just making them a lot, cleaning rivers, cleaning waterways, planting trees,
really
the green sky rises that they're building, even in Portland, they have those now. So anyway, this is what we're about. So here we go. Next one. Do we want to go through all these right now? I feel like
well, maybe we do it briefly and then we come back to it at the end.
We'll come back to this at the end. We really like this this group.
This group, these graphics are from a group called Rain for Climate. And right now, I think their website changed names, but you can find their Facebook page, Rain for Climate. And they have these really nice little cartoons and graphics explaining how water vapor and soil and plants really move heat around the planet, and how they have been stabilizing the climate on the planet for all of these millennia, and how much we have altered this process and how we're suffering from that, and how it's really not that hard for us to repair and bring the function back into our systems.
Again, it's really not hard. So we really like to just also give a very hopeful, we do need to have that place. So this picture here is of a thriving, of a well intact,
unmolested, system, healthy system,
right? And notice there aren't any buildings or whatever. And so, think about it. 2/3 of the rain is recycled locally in the small water cycle. That's what's supposed to be happening. But now think about the communities that we live in, and the hardscaping that's being done, and the lack of rain gutters, and the lack of water recycling.
We'll show that
in a moment. The vegetation, so the plants pump the moisture into the air, which cools the land and also sequesters carbon. And this is, we were going to say this later, we'll just say it now because it's on the slide, but the volume of water in the soil, think about this, is 10 times that held in lakes and rivers of the world.
Invisible water in the
soil. Water. And so we'll talk, okay. See, it's hard to talk about the one and then talk about the other and jump the gun. Yeah. And then this idea of sensible heat we'll talk about more as well. So this is only 10% of the radiation is converted into sensible heat, which is heat that's rising and making everything hotter. And then eventually then pushes the clouds away, basically, that type of heat.
This is the heat that's getting caught underneath this blanket of carbon dioxide. This is the heat inside the greenhouse.
So we won't spend a lot of time here.
Yeah, but just noticing here how the soil is so much more dried out. There's all of this heat rising from the buildings. There's way less space for water to infiltrate in and way fewer plants to cycle water in the ground back up as vapor into the sky. So a lot of the that heat moving and that moisture cycling has been interrupted. And so the cities are hot and unpleasant.
But fear not. But just really again about the sensible heat, again, 60%. So if there's not a lot of moisture and there's not a lot of plants and the soil is super dry, that solar energy, 60% of it gets converted. And I think it's actually even more if you look at some cases. So there's more of that heat. And that's what they're showing up here, is that this heat is coming here, there's fires, and these clouds are kind of, you know, there's not a lot coming down here.
Yeah, this rising heat off the cities actually pushes clouds away, pushes moisture and water vapor away.
Just like my mother lives in Los Angeles, and she's like, oh, they say it's going to rain tomorrow, right? And then she sees big clouds and then it kind of misses them. And I always keep thinking like, yeah, well,
sweep around.
It's very hot. Okay, so here's what we would like, right? And again, focusing on an urban area and looking at how can we be humans on this planet in a way that is not going to be detrimental, right? So here there's still, but notice the green rooftops here. Green rooftops are wonderful. Think of all of the hundreds and thousands of square footage of empty rooftops that are creating this heat that's pushing back up. If we could cool that down, I believe in New York, they even started to paint, they started painting the tops of buildings white to have it be less heat. And then people started thinking, oh, well, can we plant up there too? Like imagine the amount of food that could be grown. So we'll go there.
So also notice how much less paved surfaces there are and how many more water bodies there are and trees. Yeah. So restoring that kind of aspect to our parks, really making our parks about trees and little ponds or wetlands or things like that, so that water can recharge into the lower levels.
Right. And then here also that the groundwater is being replenished along with the soil, and the soil, when it's not dried out, when the water is not getting shunted away, can hold way more water. So we'll talk about that as well. Any questions about this? Anything so far? Nico? No. Okay. Oh yeah, we get really into this. So we're talking about the sensible heat, right? So we put this in here.
Should we talk a little bit more about the water cycle and the phase change piece, or just jump right into this?
Should we come back to it?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, we'll come back. So here we go. So we're not big techies, right? So we have this slideshow. We wanted to have that up for y'all so you can also, get it in a handout later. But now we're just going to talk a little bit about soil. And we're just going to kick that off, and we're just going to have these really pretty pictures of soil, what we think is healthy soil. So you have the little critters in here, the different roots, the different little different growing things. It looks moist. It looks like if you picked it up, you could squeeze it in and it would feel good, and it would probably smell really, really good. And it's the same here. Like look at the root system on this very, very, very little being right here. Right. So this is healthy soil, right? This is the water is coming down low. You can see how the roots just get a little bit tinier and tinier as they go down, and they're bringing things up. So when you have,
there's probably a bunch of mycorrhizal fungi in there.
Yeah, probably a ton, right? It's such a beautiful picture. So we're going to talk a little bit about soil and just leave you to this. So you can either look at the screen or not look at the screen or look at us. Fine. So soil is one of these things. People call it dirt. And dirt can be not a nice word for some people, right? And there's a lot of people misunderstanding what we need to actually do to tend our soil. And especially now that we're in a drought, so for us, we look around and we're like, oh my God, we're in a drought. Why is everybody, so in Santa Cruz, I'm not sure how it is in Vallejo or in Benicia, right? In Santa Cruz, one of the new rages is people are taking their downspouts and then building these beautiful little river-like looking ways to the gutter in the street from there. So it looks really pretty, but they're basically taking the water from their roof and they're putting it in the sewer drain, right? And we're thinking, so where is that information? Because if we were all keeping even the little bit of rain we get on site, it's going to keep the soil more open and moist. And the key here is, if you remember nothing else, is that dry soil cannot hold water. right? So it's like when you have a house plant that you haven't watered for a long time and it's fully dry and you try to water it and the water just kind of goes off to the sides and comes out, right? It doesn't sink in because it's dry. There's no air there. There's no air, there's no space. There's no little critters. The roots are probably really struggling and it can take a while. So dry soil cannot hold water. And so if we're looking at all the floodings that are happening in places that are really drought parched, is because the water isn't in the soil. And if there's no water in the soil, then when it does rain, the water can't soak in. And so this idea that, oh, well, I don't want to keep water on site because then everything will flood. It's not quite true. And we're not saying flood your property, but if we keep our soil moist, then when it rains, it's going to sink in deeper, and we're going to have a much greater effect and a beautiful impact on our soil.
Yeah. So can you talk about how all the soil organisms help the?
Oh yeah. So think about this. So in a handful of dirt, or I'm going to say dirt, it's soil, right? But people use it. Take
back the word dirt.
Let's think about that. So in a handful of soil, there's about 36 in healthy soil. There should be about 36 trillion microbes. Okay, think about that. In a handful of healthy soil, 36 trillion microbes. And we only have mapped or totally understand or even trying to understand 1 million of them, right? So it's, who is it? It's Masters, Nicole?
Yeah.
Nicole Masters, another wonderful author who we love. What was the name of her book? For the Love of Soil. For the Love of Soil. She refers to the microbes as these underground herds of life. She's like, if you were like a little microbe underground, it would be like a bustling city. There's so many microbes and they're all different sizes. There's big ones and small ones. And then there's also just soil organisms, right? They get a little bit bigger. But the role that they play is like, honestly, their life and death and create the soil, right? So they're moving through, they're creating air pockets, they're creating poo and, waste products that are adding, like compost to that soil. And if it's dry and, if you go out and you just sort of get this dusty stuff, there's not a lot of microbes in there because there's not food for them. So what we're really wanting to do is grow and feed our soil, and even more correct is grow and feed the soil microbes, right? And so that's what we're doing. And we need to do that. I'm just going to put in a little plug for plants right there. Like a lot of people say, I'm going to go feed my plants. But often when we're feeding our plants, we're actually feeding our soil so that the soil can be very rich, which will make the plant very strong and thriving, right? So do you want to say anything more about the microbes?
Well, just there's so much to say. There's so much to say, and they secrete all this stuff that that's kind of more gelatinous, right? And it helps keep the soil from getting so dried out, and it helps hold open like that sponginess so that it can really just soak it out. Exactly.
And so what even is healthy soil, if we're thinking about that? So a lot of people, we talk about organic matter. So we're going to use the term organic matter a bunch coming up, starting right now. And people sometimes ask us, well, what is organic matter? Right. So organic matter, the easy answer is anything that was living before, right? So it's all of the plants and it is the microbes and it is animals and it is poo and pee and from birds and beings
twigs and
leaves and all of that. That's all organic matter. Okay. But if you're thinking about healthy soil, what's so profound is that healthy soil is mostly mineral. So it's 45% mineral, right? From the parent material. Which is like rocks and stones and whatnot that's broken down. So that's like almost half, right? And then you have equal parts water and air, 25% of water and 25% air. And it's 5% organic matter, right?
It's a very small amount. It has a huge impact.
Right. And without that organic matter, though, all of this that we see here is not possible.
Yeah.
It's not possible. And the other key thing to remember is that 50% is actually air and water.
Yeah.
And that air and water is what allows all of this growth, all of this life, all of this diversity,
right,
to actually occur.
And then also complementarily, all of this life is what allows the air and the water to be able to move through the soil by keeping it open, by keeping it fluffy and porous and spongy.
Exactly. And so this is what we're talking about with, if our soil if we're not tending to our soil and the moisture in our soil, then it's very difficult for us to take care of the plants that we want to grow, right? And our water, and to manage our water. So
to keep things healthy, we can't keep things healthy when they're constantly in this stress of like not enough moisture, maybe not enough air, and not enough nutrient and life to sustain them.
Great. And so then we want to talk about, okay, so dry soil just cannot hold water.
So let's talk about how we can get it to hold more water.
Well, which I'm going to start with here.
Yeah.
So we want to start with, so another woman that we love, Dr. Christine Jones. She is an amazing soil scientist out of Australia. I start to talk with an Australian accent sometimes when I start reading her papers. I love her. We love her. And she talks about the 3 phases of carbon. And the 3 phases of carbon are basically, there's a gas, so there's CO2 in the atmosphere, right? So we all know about that. That gets a lot of media attention, right? So that's one way. And then there's solid carbon, okay? And so the solid carbon, this is actually kind of a cool diagram, right? So So we've got, say we have the carbon
gas in the air.
Carbon gas in the air. And so the plants take in that gas. This is why they're the facilitators, right? This is why they're part air. So they take it in and they make solid carbon, which is the stems, the leaves, the roots.
Their bodies,
right here. And then through their roots, they make what she calls, or what is called, liquid carbon. And liquid carbon is also known as root exudates.
Yummy.
Yeah, root exudates. Do you EX? Sorry, we don't have the chat open to put that in. I don't know, Allison, if you remember root exudates.
Yeah, EXUDATE. Exudate.
Exudes.
Things
They
that are exuded. Yeah.
So they are exuded from the roots, and they're these like sugary, sweet, sticky, yummy, and those exudates that are exuding. We don't have time to go completely into all of that, what it does. But what those sugary exudates do is they bring in microbes that want to eat the exudates.
Super good microbe food.
And the microbes have many, many functions that, again, I mean, in another article by Dr. Christine Jones, she talks about, well, we won't even go into quorum sensing, but just how
they secrete enzymes and natural plant hormones and natural plant antibiotics.
Right, but they can take on the different forms of fixing nitrogen and doing different things that are very beneficial for the plants.
Super supporters of the plant.
So what we're wanting to do, again, is to get more of this liquid carbon, and the liquid carbon and these exudates, this is how topsoil is formed. Okay, this is how topsoil is formed. And if we are spraying the soil and plants with strong fertilizers and chemicals,
herbicides and pesticides,
we're not only killing whatever herbicide or pesticide we thought was really bad, but we're also really decimating these microbial communities that are coming to feed off the exudates, that create the possibility for the plant to even have the exudates, because again, 50% of the healthy soil is air and water, right? So in order to create better topsoil, we're wanting to make sure we have a lot of that sticky, yummy, sugary exudate.
That's right.
Coming through.
That with the microbes that come and eat it, they make that spongy texture with all of that life in it and all of that water holding capacity.
Yeah. Okay. Exciting, right? We find it exciting. And here's the good news. A lot of people want to, again, we want this just to be really simple. So we read that if you take an acre of land, it's just 1 acre of land, and we all don't have an acre. I get to tend a quarter acre where I am, but just bear with me for a moment.
Start with the acre, then we'll break it down.
So remember what we said about 5% of healthy soil is organic matter. And if we just increase the soil that we have, increase the organic matter in the soil we have by 1% in an acre. So say you just had an acre, by 1%, you would be able to hold 19 to 25,000 gallons of water more. Okay, think about this. And this is not what traditional agricultural practices promote.
And we're not talking about a lake or a wetland or anything like that. We're just talking about healthy, moisture-holding topsoil.
Right, because again, 25% of that healthy soil should be water. And so if we're not watering because we're afraid of the drought, we're going to flood later because we're not going to have anything to hold the water that actually then comes down. So to put it, though, into terms of of us,
like a backyard garden, 1,000
like a backyard garden.
Something.
So for 1 square foot, and again, just, because a lot of people don't have big gardens, but for 1 square foot, that would mean you would only have to add 4.6 pounds of organic matter. Okay. And that's like, so a bag of worm castings is like 5 to 8 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And a bag, what we like to use, the organic soil building conditioner, OSBC, is about 20 pounds. Yeah. So we're not even talking a lot of expense in order to do this. So
you add about 5 pounds of organic matter to your 1 square foot, and then you can increase the water holding capacity of that 1 square foot by half a gallon. So half a gallon doesn't sound like a ton compared to the 20,000 gallons for an acre, but that's just 1 square foot.
It's 1 square foot.
If you have 1,000 square feet, then that's 500 gallons of water that can be held in the soil. By adding a modest amount of organic matter. So you can use compost to add that. You could use your grass clippings and all of your trimmings and your
leaves,
stuff,
your leaves that fall from the trees that you have. And again, you don't want to make it, there's this whole aesthetic. And we could also use a little change in all of our aesthetics.
We need to loosen up and messy up a little bit.
And it's not to say we want to all be fire wise and fire safe as well. And there's ways to have it all. And that doing this, increasing the moisture of our soil increases the moisture and decreases the microclimate around us in our communities, which is all good around if we're thinking about fires and that such.
Yeah.
So
some people get so excited about this, they end up going and getting organic matter from other people, from restaurants, you get your coffee grounds, you get your friend's horse manure, If you get the bug, you get really into it, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So here we've gone off on soil. I think we're going to switch to plants. Or I'm sorry,
water.
We're going to do water.
We're going to switch to water now.
Switch to water.
So right, but wait, we were already talking about water.
Yeah, we are, right? So we're going to segue from what we need to do with soil to increase the water holding capacity, and then we're just going to start talking about water.
Yeah.
Doesn't this make you feel nice and cool? It's
So water. We're all familiar with the hydrological cycle. But the way that we've been managing the planet and all of that pavement and all of the compacted earth, it really means that we've prevented a lot of the underground portion of the hydrological cycle. So the water that falls on the earth, like Anne said, the soil is dry everywhere where we've cut the forests, everywhere where we've paved, everywhere where there's just been run over by vehicles or exposed for months. It's too dry and too dead to absorb water. So rain on those surfaces just runs off, carrying any loose sediment and polluting things like this beautiful river and the ocean, and silting up dams and generally being destructive. So because we have sealed up the surface and we don't have that water in the earth anymore, the whole landscape is getting drier and drier and less able to receive water. So it's kind of this exacerbating loop right now. So if we can do all of the things that Anne was talking about with our soil and make it more porous and have it hold a little bit of water all the time, then it can receive, and then water will move through it and go down into the deeper levels and down into those aquifers. And the secret there is that then the plants, which we are trying not to talk about yet, but then the plants can really access that and they will do their magic with it. So the piece with the water and the moist soil and the plants that's so critical about the water cycle that wasn't really laid out in school is that when the water vapor is rising from the surface, when liquid water evaporates or moves through plants and is transpired by the plants, that's absorbing heat, right? It's just the physics of it, right? Liquid water going to water vapor absorbs heat. So the sun shines and solar radiation on moist earth and plants makes liquid water turn to water vapor and moves that heat. So instead of us feeling hot, we just feel kind of moist, right? And there's like a little moist updraft. And all of that moist air is rising up into the atmosphere. And it gets up there. And the water vapor out of forests has some bacteria in it that help water vapor condense much lower in the atmosphere, and it doesn't go so far. It doesn't travel across continents into the other side of the world before settling back as rain. It just rises, recondenses, and falls locally. So in your bioregion, you can be increasing rainfall simply by keeping the soil moist and having a lot more plants in there, and understanding diversity of tree species and all of these things. A couple of backyards on their own aren't going to have much of a cumulative effect. But as more and more people do this, and as cities begin planning vegetation and water harvesting and soil building into the larger urban community, then we can actually make a huge difference. And this those 3 graphics that we showed you of the healthy ecosystem, the degraded, and then the restored, that group, that organization, Rain for Climate, they have projects in Europe where they're doing larger scale stuff, where they're building the soil and holding the water, using some earthworks to give it a place to sit and settle in, with ponds and wetlands and things like that. And they're having huge results around lowering temperature and increasing rainfall. So this is no joke. Like,
I mean, it's actually so no joke that the United Nations actually has named this decade that we're in right now, like 2020 to 2030, is the decade of ecosystem restoration.
With a huge focus on city forests.
Hey! So why study permaculture? Why get a certificate? So you can be part of this amazing movement, and this new lens, a new way of seeing how we want to be living and being humans on the planet. Anything else you want to say?
Well, I think now we could go to that infrared photo.
Yeah, let's go to the infrared photo. Yeah. So just bear with me for a moment while I try to go backwards. And there we go. So easy.
This is just to bring this point home. And this photo is also from the group that we're talking about, the European group, that Rain for Climate.
Yeah, and so here, so it is in Celsius, but just to say, like 28 degrees Celsius is about 82 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe. Right? So here, just the normal water. So these are the same, and this is an infrared. So the water pure is about 26 degrees Celsius. It's pretty warm, right? But and then the forest is about 28, still really moist, right? Still blue. Notice this. So all of these trees holding all of this water.
Yeah, the forest and the water are pretty much the same temperature, right? See how cool that is?
Right, and so then you'd be like, okay, this is fine. This is a nice cool meadow. And it is. And notice that the wet meadow is about, this is the wet meadow here.
That blue splotch right there, yeah.
Is 29, very similar to the forest and the water, but the harvested meadow is already 42 Celsius. So much warmer.
Yeah.
So much warmer. I believe that's like over 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
And the asphalt is 49.
Yeah. So the asphalt is the white, or the hottest is the white.
The hottest is the white. And so again, bringing home this need for, cooling our microclimates. We must do that. And so, the hardscaping is necessary for some things, but let's not go overboard, and let's notice the need for keeping things cool.
Yeah. And just to bring home that shade is not making the big difference here. It's not like you can throw up an umbrella or a tent or something and you can start to lower these temperatures. It's about the moisture. The plants need to have access to moist soil, and or there needs to be moisture that's evaporating actively off the ground in order to keep these temperatures in the 20s, in these 20 Celsius. Otherwise, we start shooting up. So, we go from, what is this, the 70s or 80s here?
70s,
water.
80s. And this, so 49 Celsius is 120 degrees Fahrenheit.
120 degrees.
So that's the heat that's rising off of it. So again, we're and so that's why, looking at urban areas to plan them to be more green is just more humane. It's going to be a lot more, people are going to be a lot more relaxed. They have done studies, even in cities as large as Detroit, where, they've taken neighborhoods and planted more trees, and they found that the crime rate has gone down. People want to gather more. They want to be more in community. This is not
respiratory illness rates go down, mental illness, asthma, allergies.
So it's really real. And the thing we like about this particular group, I mean, we want to have our own infrared cameras, right? Because wouldn't it be fun, to be able to just show people like, wow, this is the impact that you can have.
Yeah.
So anything more we want to say about that? But does that bring that home for y'all? It makes me experience walks through the city and city parks way differently. I feel like I can physically feel the temperature flux.
Yeah, exactly. And just to bring it home again with the climate and the weather patterns, when you have large areas that are so hot and they're just creating this rising column of hot air, that rising pressure is messing with all the different bodies of air above, and it's affecting the weather patterns, and it's making the weather more violent. And all of these dry areas that don't have plants in them, that can't re-evaporate moisture, then if the moisture from the coast just kind of peters out, and we're getting desertified inland, and we're getting violent storms on the coast. And it's because of the loss of vegetative cover on the planet, which led to the loss of soil. And then the soil was messed up and it couldn't hold the water. And then there was no water. And so we couldn't grow plants. So, ooh,
that's why we can't talk about them by themselves. They have to be talked about together, especially if you're wanting to have impact climate.
Yeah. And that's why we've devoted our lives to this work, is because it's so important, and it feels so actually easy.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. So how is it easy? We're going to tell you now.
Yeah. We're going to go right into plants.
That's
Little
right.
review. So here we are. We're going to talk about plants. And so plants, so we talk about growing soil, feeding soil. We talk about planting water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're talking about initiating plants.
Yeah.
And how do we initiate plants?
We just make the least change for the greatest effect.
That's right.
We just give them a little start and off they go.
Yeah. They don't ever question. They're like, okay, cool. I'll grow here, but not if this was right. I don't have any water, right?
Okay, occasionally they question, but mostly they go for it.
But they'll still do it though. They'll give you all they've got, right?
Yeah.
So plants.
Yeah, so plants are the number one best tool for drawing carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it back in the earth. So the atmosphere, it's creating this hot blanket that we don't need. And in the earth, it's helping us hold water that helps us move water vapor to cool the planet. Mm. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. And trees.
Trees are the best.
Yeah, trees are amazing. Another woman that we'll mention, Jude Schwartz. She wrote Water in Plain Sight. And she spoke about forests just being this, such a beautiful image, being vertical rivers, right? That there's so much water held in the trees, in the forests. And if you think about the water, so the one thing, what is a 40-foot tree, right? Mm-hmm. Gathers in 50 gallons of dissolved nutrients from the soil, brings it all the way back into its outermost branches, and converts it into 10 pounds of carbohydrates and 60, is it pounds? Cubic feet of pure oxygen. One 40-foot tree.
And it cools off the equivalent of what 10 air conditioners can cool off, that much air.
From one tree.
Just by doing its thing, just by living and making leaves and photosynthesizing.
Yeah. So
yeah, a few more trees would be really nice. And there's a lot of really beautiful, simple permaculture techniques that you learn in a permaculture course, and then you begin your lifelong exploration of. And these techniques really help you get going with successfully growing trees, making good soil.
And I think it would be really cool. I always love when we talk about the stomata of the plants in relation to water and soil. What do you think? Just briefly.
Sure. Okay.
Because people don't understand that.
Okay. So this is really cool. The stomata of the plants are essential to this water vapor movement. And what they are they're like little holes on the underside of the leaf. We found out recently manzanitas have them on the top too, but anyway, they're mostly on the underside of the leaf. And when a plant has as much moisture as it needs and it's standing in the soil and it's photosynthesizing, it opens up those stomata in order to take in carbon dioxide from the air around it. And it uses that carbon dioxide, it combines it with the water in the soil, and it uses the sun energy to make its own solid carbon, its own body. And it releases then water vapor and oxygen as byproducts, right?
Right. And so that's where a lot of this vapor, right?
Yeah.
That's where the vapor is coming from.
Exactly.
And what happens when
they get too dry? Okay. So the way that the stomata are opened and closed by the plant are via a pair of little cells on either side of the hole. So they're like crescent-shaped cells. And when the plant draws water out of them and they shrink, then the hole opens. And if the plant wants to close the hole, it pumps water into them and they close. So when the plant is happy and has enough water, it opens up the stomata and it starts to photosynthesize, taking in CO2 and releasing oxygen and water vapor. But when it starts to get too dry, if there's not enough moisture in the soil, it can't keep transpiring. It has to hold on to the remaining water that it has. So it takes some of its remaining water to plump up those cells, and close the stomata, and then it just kind of sits. It's not photosynthesizing anymore. It's not making oxygen anymore. It's not taking in carbon dioxide anymore. It can't. It doesn't have enough water.
Yeah.
If it continues to get drier and drier and drier, it doesn't have enough water to hold the guard cells closed, and the guard cells open and the stomata open, and it just wilts. So that's that first stage of wilt that we've all seen on plants. And when we don't give it some water and the capacity to close those guard cells, then the plant dies.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, that was a little sadder than I thought it would be, but I think it's just very important to just get that piece of it, because I think that people, again, when we think of watering plants, we're really, then we think of just sort of spraying it with water and not really understanding all of the complexity of what's working, right?
Yeah,
so when we're watering the plants, you don't want to just spray them. You want to really water the soil around them, and not even just around them, but a little further out, so that their roots are going to grow and reach and out for that. And so their stomata can stay in good shape. Yeah. So,
I mean, and the good news is that the plants help each other. They link up with each other underground, and there are different kinds of fungi and mycorrhizal fungi, which are just, fungi root-like structures. They connect different plants underground, and they help them hold on to their water, and they move water from an area that has more water to an area that has less water. So there's this massive underground network of communication and support going on that science has only recently, like really in the last decade, started to unravel, like literally, like people are digging in and identifying these little strands and pulling them out. So,
and one last thing we want to say about plants is that this is one of the principles that we mentioned was diversity.
Yeah.
And, Dr. Christine Jones, again, we would say that she really blew our minds a few years ago. We went to a composting boot camp, and she was talking about cover crops and how, and so if you don't know what a cover crop is, right? So this is what you can do in between plantings or whatnot
to nourish a bare area that you want to start a garden on.
Yeah. And a lot of people just put out fava beans
or crimson clover
or something, and that's like pretty that. That's what we've been doing. And she's like, no, you don't need 5 different kinds or 10 different kinds of cover crop. Really you want to go for 60 different kinds of plants, right? So she's not speaking to any choirs around here. Okay, she's going out and talking to like ranchers and like big ag farmers to get them to do that. So we don't necessarily have to, but again, the idea is just to diversify in whatever areas we are attending. And the more we diversify what we're planting on top, the more we're diversifying the microbes underneath, and the more helpers there are for everyone.
So it stays much healthier. Everybody's supporting everybody. There's a lot of stress resilience and extreme resilience going on.
Right. Because if a pest, whatever, so if an adapted little being comes in and maybe decimates one of those, there's still 59 others, that can help it recover or help the community. So just definitely want to put that in about plants. Yeah. So now here are some of the ways in which we, so these are the main ones. And we'll say with the permaculture course, with the PDC through Sustainable Solano, we're going to go over all of these and do hands-on
for most of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think pretty much
all of these things. That's why we chose,
maybe
not a hedgerow, but we'll talk about this. So these are permaculture practices for integrating soil, water, and plants. And they're so least change for greatest effect.
Yeah. And they can be done on a really small scale in your kitchen, or they can be done on a larger scale. So pick your place, wherever you're able to impact the system.
Right. So think about compost. We want to talk just a bit about each of them. So composting, basically, we talked about the food scraps. We talked about the yard waste that just gets put away. So how can you compost that? And there are so many fun ways that so you can have composting bins outside. We have recently gotten into a form of compost called Bokashi, which is from Japan, and it's made to be like a countertop composting.
Little fermentation.
It's a fermentation. It's an anaerobic composting process that we're not quite in a rhythm with it yet, but absolutely I need to make some quick, because actually the juice from the Bokashi, you can put it down your drain, and your drain will your drain will never clog again.
Yeah.
I've been struggling for years.
We tried it and we were like, wow, It worked so well. It had so many organisms in it, right? That then when they encountered that drain sludge,
they just had a field day.
Ate it up.
They
right?
ate it
Isn't
up.
that
So,
crazy?
and again, so turn your food scraps into a super duper powerful drain cleaner, as well as then way diluted plant food,
Yes.
right? So Bokashi is an option. Obviously outside, Lydia is a big fan. We are a big fan of just burying the compost in your yard, but there are really better ways to do it than others. So we would want you to consult with us maybe about that first.
It's nice to have a good hole digger in the household too.
Yes.
If digging holes is not your thing, then this wouldn't be a recommended method.
Right. And the really awesome thing about compost is it encompasses all of the principles that we put out, and it affects all of soil, water, and plants, right? Because you're oftentimes using things like food that were plants and plants from your garden. You're creating moisture because wet kitchen scraps. Yeah, exactly. And then the soil that it makes. So, I always tell the story that my daughters, they're kind of over it now, but they hated the compost bucket, and so finally I just put a little sign on it that said future soil. Right. And then they're like, oh, really? And so it became like, clean out the fridge. They'd be like, okay, mama, what about this? I'm like, soil, and it's so much better than just being like, oh, garbage, trash, waste. Yeah. Like this is going to be our soil, but we're going to turn this into soil. Yeah. So that's a really beautiful transformation that compost brings us.
And people are really into it. They have the bins, they end up with this beautiful black crumbly stuff. And then, other people go grand scale with the burying. We have a friend who's been burying her compost in her back alley and on down behind all the neighbors for 15 years and turned it from a barren kind of blackberry and occasional nasturtium nasty place into this gorgeous, lush back alleyway with tons of diversity and a lot of trees and beautiful flowers and things. So 15 years of guerrilla compost burying, and she created an ecosystem.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. She was in the paper.
Somebody wrote an article about her.
So another practice that we do is sheet mulching, or just, mulching. And that's really, again, using the use of on-site resources, least change for greatest effect.
It's really about protecting.
Succession of evolution too.
And protecting the soil and keeping it from drying out. And I mean, it can be as simple as a piece of cardboard and a wheelbarrow full of wood chips on top of some soil. It's really ideal to have that soil already be moist so you hold the water in, but you can throw all kinds of compost under there, or weeds, sheet mulching weeds. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, this, we'll go all the way into it. So sheet mulching weeds, it's just really nice because, here's the deal, the little plug I'll give briefly for weeds is that weeds are really our helpers, right? Weeds are there to tell us what our soil needs, what our yards need. Weeds are also really great for pollinators because they often don't need to be pollinated themselves. They just flower and flower and flower and want to seed and seed and seed and go.
Right, they do that fine.
They just do that just fine, right? And so they are a good source of that for different types of pollinators. But so since they're saying, hey, your soil needs this, right? And then we don't like the weeds, so we pull them out. Mm-hmm. And so our soil still doesn't have what they need.
It still needs it worse now.
Now it needs it still, right? And the weeds are trying to tell us. So the sheet mulch, what the sheet mulch does is so you have those weeds. And so people ask us all the time, well, do you pull out all the weeds before you sheet mulch? You say, no, you're going to leave the weeds there because your soil needs what this weed has. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to let it be here on top. We're gonna put cardboard over it. We're gonna put some moist soil, some wood chips, whatever, and it's gonna die back, but it's gonna dissolve. And so maybe it's even a weed with a deep tap root, right? And then that tap root is gonna dissolve, and then it's gonna feed all the microbes, and it's gonna create air and space for water and space for microbes. So sheet mulching is a way to really embrace the weeds for what they're here for and to get rid of them, honestly. I mean, we got rid of a bunch of ivy, which I don't think is what the soil needed, but I think having that organic matter, converting it into compost for that area. So sheet mulching can be a really beautiful way to use the weeds.
And even any kind of mulching, the sheet mulching refers to using cardboard or paper or something, but any kind of mulching, just covering the soil. And especially a lot of people who are using garden services, they come in and they rake and then they blow and they take away every little bit of cover that was trying to protect the soil. So all of the naturally falling mulch that came from the trees gets taken away weekly or monthly or whatever. And that's really, really hard on the soil, because then there's nothing to protect it and there's nothing for the worms to incorporate down into it. And so if nothing else, to just stop that from happening will begin the production of a protective blanket and improve your soil.
Yeah. Let's see. And Swales and Berms. Okay, well, we're the champion of swales. Two of them. There are many. So Swales and Berms. A swale is otherwise known as a ditch filled with wood chips, sometimes gravel, and a berm is a mound, right? And do you want to draw a little quick picture? Maybe we could just show. So the idea with the swales and berms, this is a classic permaculture practice. There's the idea of slowing, spreading, sinking, and saving water on a landscape. And so swales can also be called, infiltration, water infiltration basins. And so the part that's the trench gets filled with organic matter in the form of wood chips, although if you have cuttings recently or something that you can throw in there, that's great. And then you can plant on the berm. And Lydia's going to do, I took just like one picture real quick, but so the idea is that the swale, can you see that? Can you see that, Allison? Not really so much.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little hard for me to see just because it's such a tiny, you all are in a tiny picture right now. So maybe when you're done sharing.
So the idea is that the swales, oh, I see, because we're sharing. Okay, we'll come back. Lydia's going to draw something big and then we'll stop. And then gray water and laundry to landscape is huge right now. So talk about another reason why to get your PDC. Gray water and laundry to landscape, this is when we're using water that we have already paid for, right? That has already been delivered, that the infrastructure is already there to deliver it to us and to our homes, right? In the form of a bathtub or a shower or a sink or a washing machine, right? How can we keep all that water that's already, all the infrastructure has been built to bring it to our homes and we just put it right on out. So this field right now, we get calls, we get contacted almost every day, definitely every week, multiple times, for people who are like, hey, I want to actually use the water from my washing machine, which can be up to what, 21 gallons per load?
Yeah, the super low ones are like 17. The old fashioned ones were more like 30. So
that many gallons that again, you already paid for, you're already using it. If you're feeling like, ooh, I can't have a garden that's lush this year because we're in a drought, and yet we're still doing laundry and we're still taking showers and we're still taking baths.
Sending that all away. This
is such an amazing way to turn that story around and to talk about using on-site biological resources. The gray water often use the swales in order to capture the water, to get it out to the plants.
And the gray water is so good for big landscape trees, right? These big trees with the stomata that are transpiring and doing the climate work, because they have deep roots, and the gray water can be discharged in a couple different places around them. And over time, it's just this regular input, and it just soaks in deep and makes this nice deep zone of gently moistened soil, not super flooded, and just really available for the tree to support your home and your microclimate and your community.
Yeah, so we'll just put a plug into that. We know there's some great people up in Benicia and Solano County with Sustainable Solano that are doing a lot of gray water education and laundry to landscape. So we'll just put a plug for that. It's
Gray Water Action.
And Gray Water Action, awesome group. So there's great people doing that, and there's just a shortage of people doing it. So another really great reason to get a permaculture design certificate. You'd still have to do more training probably as well, but it's a good first start to just get that overall holistic view, and then go on and take other specialized courses. It'd be really fun.
You end up hooking up your own washing machine right away, and then you're on the road.
Yeah, super fun. So you want to go back to the swale? How's that?
So is this any easier to see?
No, we're gonna wait till we stop sharing. We're gonna stop sharing in a moment, and then we'll do that. Okay. So sorry, like we said, we're low tech. We're low tech, which also makes our classes fun because Lydia has a certificate in scientific illustration.
We do actually,
so we do a lot of drawing and writing, and way more, more tactile. We're like that.
Yeah, and we're never in a dark room.
Never in a dark room.
We're pretty much always
usually
outside.
in a beautiful place. So roof catchment, this is rainwater roof catchment. And again, people are like, well, it doesn't rain very much, but it doesn't matter.
Gotta catch it when
there
it does.
are tens of thousands of gallons of water. If you don't have a roof catchment system, there are tens of thousands probably of gallons of water falling on top of your roof that's free, falling from the sky, that's going out into the sewage system every time it rains. We're not going to go into that, but we can't impress enough. Like, we kind of feel like every single home, every new building that's built should have rain gutters and rain catchment and all of that built in. And again, not going out onto the streets, but going into the landscape to really help, again, build the soil, to grow the plants, and to create a better microclimate.
So you just design your garden with low areas in it to receive the water during the rainy season, and you just plan for that. You plan the kind of plants, you plan the kind of substrate so that, you have the drainage that you need and the infiltration that you need. And it really, over time, it builds up that underground aquifer and that groundwater table. And we're not flooding out your home, where there's still an overflow that's going to go into the storm drains when your earth can't take anymore. But over time,
let's hope we get to, that we get there. Let's hope we get there.
But over time, the soil building and all of the microbes and everything that we keep talking about, they make it so your soil can hold more without being saturated, right? It just makes it a better sponge. It's not like a soggy mess. It's actually just fluffy and moist and fertile.
Exactly. Doesn't that sound great? Don't we all want that?
Yeah.
Right. So, and the last one, we're super big into hedgerows right now. Hedgerows, windbreaks, and food forests,
which could all be one and the same depending on how you design them.
And this is just trees and plant diversity. So a hedgerow can be a windbreak, it can be a food forest, and it can be a windbreak that's also a food forest, right? The most important thing about hedgerows is it was just really natural fencing, right? Before. And it has the ability to, it would transform down here in Santa Cruz, our South County areas, where there's a lot of big agriculture, and actually, up in your areas as well, the big open fields just that go on and on and on. If they were lined with lovely trees,
native shrubs,
understory trees, understory. Then you have habitat for more birds. You have habitat for more pollinators, for more of everything. Again, bringing temperatures down, bringing more moisture. It's going to make the food that's grown in those fields so much better. It's going to make the quality of life for the people that work in those areas so much better.
That's right.
It's now just a win-win-win for everyone.
Now you have the moisture, the shade, the wind reduction from, just having interruptions in the wind blowing over these huge fields all the time. And you can select different species, whatever you want. People are making mini hedgerows with giant sunflowers, and then there's other people who are making them 20-foot wide with saltbush and ceanothus and manzanita and willows and all this different stuff. So, they're really exciting, and they also stop erosion and help water soak in and stop the movement of things away. Like, they help us keep everything on the land where we are.
Sound good and fun? Yes. So, again, in this permaculture design course, we're going to be doing hands-on for each of these things, and at least, sharing what we know. And also, we always learn from everyone who takes a course with us. So that's what we've got for today. It's 6:47. We'd love to know if you have any questions. We're going to stop sharing so that maybe we can show the swale and berm. So sorry. I should have put that in there.
All right, Allison, any questions?
There you go. Can you see the swale now?
Yes, thank you.
Swale, and here's the berm. So this gets filled with, we'll just say wood chips for now. But, for example, I did a big clearing out of some branches. I did some pruning of one of the trees, an apple tree or whatever. And so we filled it with that and put the wood chips on the top. This can become a path, and then the berm gets planted, and so then this gets covered. This can be a path. When the water comes in here, it sinks in. And then, it's hard to hold it
and talk about it at the same time. You're doing great.
Anyway, so then the water sinks in, and then goes into the soil deeper down, right? So the swale is probably about a foot deep. It can be even deeper. It could be a little shallower. But what we're doing is we're getting the water in deeper right away, and we're holding it there with organic matter. And then that organic matter is, again, it's bringing the wet microbes that are doing what? Right?
Holding the space open.
Holding the space open. Yay. So that's
And so you can then, like Anne said before, you can direct your roof water and your gray water into the swale so that you have year-round moisture from the gray water, and then you're managing that storm water runoff from the storms in the winter, so it's not just rushing over, right? It has a place to sit and stop and soak in. So using it for both really optimizes that deep infiltration, like Anne said.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we hope those all sound exciting for you. We'd love if you have any questions at all.
Yeah, and I put in the chat, if you want to ask questions in the chat, you can. If you want to use the raise hand button, we can get you off of mute to ask a question. I'm also going to share the link to the brief survey in the chat, just so you can help us with future planning.
Maybe you want to put a link to the class, to the PDC?
Yeah, I did that earlier. I'm happy to do that again. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, can you close that door? Thank you. So bright.
The sun is doing that thing.
The sun is doing that thing where it's changing location and shining. There we go. Now we look a little darker. Okay. Any questions? No.
Okay, and if you know, I know that you two wanted to. Oh wait, no, Julie, let me. You know what? I'm gonna change the settings here. So, okay, yeah. So, Julie, you should be able to unmute yourself. I'm gonna ask you to unmute, but if you want to try that.
Thank you. So I've been doing permaculture and soil building for, I guess, about 8 years now, and I love it. I'm just so enthusiastic. The chop and drop, and but you never stop learning. I love everything you brought tonight. You know, things I've never heard of before, and it further stimulates and motivates. But I recently just had a great challenge through misunderstanding and researching a little about defensible space around your house. And I'm struggling with, you know, if you look at Marin's defensible space, which is fire protection and zones around your house, where you're not even supposed to have anything at the strictest level of it, like within 5 feet of your house, and it's just, and leaves of small, you know, small thin things, you don't want to have them in the strictest requirements. And I'm just in shock, and it's like this whole rethinking, and like I'm like, but wait, I don't want to kind of have a hard pan soil. I want to soak things down, and I'm trying to devise like ways around it, like building up more. And it's kind of been a challenge and interesting. And I think I misunderstood some things, and anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there as something that I'm going through right now and trying to figure out how to move with it. You know, do you all have anything to say about that?
Yeah,
We do. I mean, that's like a whole.
Talk about the moist soil moat.
Yeah. So, I mean, so we're actually working with a client right now who lives up in the mountains and is, you know, we had all these ideas for planting, and she was like, oh no, we can't. But, you know, Cal Fire is coming out here and we're not able to take out all of this. So again, with the roof water catchment, with the gray water and the keeping the soil moist, we like to throw out this idea of a moist soil moat, right? So really, let's try to make a moist soil moat around our homes by keeping the water on site. And, you know, maybe there's hardscaping, maybe there's some really cool ground cover that can be put in between there. And I think what Cal Fire doesn't like, I mean, this is what we've read, right? So the little leaves you're talking about, if those are all falling onto parched soil,
right,
no moisture, yeah, that's more of a fire danger.
They're like
but
little embers.
Then they're like little embers. But if those are falling and decaying and becoming soil and being eaten by organisms, and it's kept moist, and the area is kept growing. Again, we're not suggesting that anybody go against any of those recommendations. Just trying to find workarounds to keep the aesthetic and to also really make sure that the hardscaping and the different removal of plants that are being suggested are not decreasing the moisture.
Yeah.
Because that is also not what anybody wants as far as fire goes.
Right. And also just choosing more deciduous stuff that has the wetter leaf matter, you know, and then, it turns brown and it dies later in the season, but usually it's green still into the fire season, right? Especially if we're watering it with our gray water, especially if we've had our soil really built up and plumped with and stuff. And then, you know, that 5 feet next to the house, you can grow non-woody plants. And there's
I was thinking even, well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, there's a whole class of plants called Herbaceous Perennials, and they come up in the summer or in the spring usually and grow through the summer, and then they totally die back. And so they could be cut down early if it was a really early fire season so that they were gone, but you would have had that green, moist lushness through the summer. And they're very, because they're not woody, right? They are very lush and lush looking, and they can thrive on the gray water.
Yeah. So trying to find workarounds. We don't want to tell anybody to not do what's being recommended, but there are ways that you can still have the beauty and keep the moisture. And I think that anybody doing fire-wise work or fire prevention work would say that all of our properties being a bit more moist is going to help everybody out.
Yeah.
And lush.
Yeah. And there's some really interesting research. There's a book called Smokescreen by a man named Chad Hansen. And he says the data really points to a lot of the excessive fuel load reduction and fire safety clearing is actually really just increasing the temperature on the ground and increasing the wind speed.
Yeah.
That's what it just feels kind of wrong. You know, it goes against the grain of the building and so thank you.
It's a great resource. We can send that, maybe Allison, if you're going to send out resources for folks.
Yeah, that would be great. We actually had a request on Facebook for a link to the article about your friend who did the guerrilla composting in the back alley. So maybe when you send that, if you have the link to that article, we can share that as well.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out which issue that was. Last year.
She will know.
Oh yeah, she'll know. We'll ask her.
We'll ask her. Yeah. No, great ideas. And it's such a great conversation. I mean, those are conversations, Julie, that I think a lot of us are having, and really, really important ones as well.
Because it's very stressful to not know what the right thing is to do, and to have your values and the requirements for fire safety go counter to each other. That's a really uncomfortable place to be, and we're all struggling.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was also just thinking, get the leaves and then get a few more wood chips on top, just like kind of keep building that and on a regular basis. I'll be living in a mound of wood chips.
Yeah, well, we're really big fans. We didn't get to go into it here, but we're really big fans of microbial inoculants that you can make yourself, and then you put them in a backpack sprayer and you can spray them on the ground, and they speed up the decomposition.
Ooh.
Having dry leaves, you have
you have compost
faster. So our favorite recipe is called lactose serum, and we'll send that with Allison as well.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, wonderful. Do we want to end?
Yeah. Thanks so much for having your camera on, Julie. That was really nice to see your face and your enthusiasm and engagement. Thank you.
And thank you all who didn't either. And
yes.
we love that you're here also. And thank you for your kind words in the chat. We really appreciate that. So we're also, the other thing we like to do is sing in our classes. And Allison was in our very first PDC, so you know all about that. So we wanted to, thank you, Jenny. So we thought we'd end with the song. You can just sing along with us. And it's actually the last slide, but we don't need it. It's easy, right?
Okay, yeah, it's easy.
Now we all have our faces. So, this song is written by someone named Vernon Bush, and it's called "I Can't Make This Journey by Myself." And we're thinking that the plants and the soil microbes
and the water
can all be singing this. Okay, so we won't sing for too long, but maybe you'll get the hang of it.
Yep.
And sorry if it's going to be Zoomy. So that's going to make it kind of fun and interesting. Like, we're going to do it anyway. Okay. Okay. Ready?
What's the note?
Oh, I don't have my pitch back with me, man. I can't make this journey by myself. I can't make this journey by myself. I need you. I need me. And with love, we'll be in community. Bum, bum, bum. I can't make this journey by myself. I can't make this journey by myself. I need you. I need me. And with love, we'll be in community. Bum, bum, bum. I can't make this journey by myself. I can't make this journey by myself. I need you. I need you. And with love, we'll be in community. Bum, bum, bum. I can't make this journey by myself. We all can't make this journey by ourselves. It's being it together. So much more fun.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. That was really fun.
Thank you so much. We will get the resources out to everyone, as well as a video for some of you who joined a little late, so you can see the whole presentation. Thank you, Anne and Lydia. We really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you, Allison. Bye. Thanks.
Bye, y'all.
Good night.